Now we're going to move on to the panel. I'm going to go ahead and introduce each of the panelists and we'll open up for Q&A. So first we have Tiffany Nichols. Her pronouns are she, her, hers. Tiffany is a doctoral candidate in the Department of the History of Science at Harvard University. Her current research focuses on how place, surrounding environment, and laboratory are embedded in the output signals of the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, or LIGO. In this vein, she focuses on how physicists and engineers understand what is a gravitational wave signal and what is merely noise generated by the instrument, its location, and surrounding environment. Prior to her PhD studies, Tiffany earned both a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and a Juris Doctor at the University of Virginia. Tiffany has also held positions at the RAND Corporation, the University of California Berkeley School of Law, and at highly ranked US law firms where she focused on intellectual property litigation, patent prosecution, and portfolio management. In addition, Tiffany is the 2019 and 2020 chair for the Forum of Graduate Students, for the Forum of Graduate Student Affairs of the American Physical Society. So she clearly has her hands full. Next, we have Raziq Noorali, he, him, his pronouns. Raziq is a first-year grad student in the physics department at the University of Michigan, where he studies galaxy cluster cosmology. His higher level education began at College of the Desert, a community college in California. Eventually, he earned an associate's degree in physics and transferred to the University of California, Santa Cruz, where he received BS in physics with an emphasis in astronomy. He has spent his time divided between working with scientific collaborations like the Dark Energy Survey and Large Synoptic Survey Telescope working groups, and with outreach groups aimed towards those typically underrepresented in STEM, like MESA, the Students Out in STEM, and the Society for Women in Physics. His current research involves looking at high redshift simulations of galaxy clusters to do data analysis and build the framework for LSST data management. All right, next we have Chuan Chen, pronouns she, her, hers. Xuan is a fifth-year PhD student at the University of Illinois at Chicago, working on the CMS experiment at CERN. She received her bachelor's degree in 2015 from Purdue University Northwest. Her research focuses on understanding the top quark, a fundamental particle, and using it as a tool to probe new particles that build our universe. During her graduate studies, she has also been involved in building and testing new hardware for CMS. Xuan currently serves as an ex officio advisor to the APS Committee on Careers and Professional Development and to the Forum on Graduate Student Affairs. She served as an elected officer of the Fermilab Student and Postdoc Association in 2017 and 2018 and is excited to help students in APS with their career development. And then lastly, we have Taylor Hutchison, she, her, hers pronouns. Taylor is a fourth-year astrophysics graduate student and NSF graduate fellow at Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. She works with some of the most distant galaxies ever discovered, ones which existed when the universe was barely 1 billion years old, meaning their light traveled over 12.7 billion years to reach our telescopes. In order to study these early galaxies, she uses some of the largest telescopes on the Earth and in space. For her undergraduate studies, Taylor attended a small liberal arts university called Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas, and received her BSc in physics with a focus in astrophysics and a minor in mathematics. Aside from her research, Taylor is the editing director for Unique Scientists, an international program dedicated to removing stereotypes about what a scientist should look like, something that is very important to her as a bisexual woman in science. In her spare time, she loves getting tattoos that reflect her love for marine biology, playing her cello, taking countless photos of her cats, and spending time with friends. All right, so those are our panelists. All are now welcome to start entering their questions in the chat window, but I will go ahead and start with maybe each panelist can quickly talk about how many schools did you apply to when you were first applying to grad schools, and how did you decide which ones to apply to? Raziq, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and start. Like was about, I'm a first-year student, so this is fairly recent to me. I applied to about 8-ish schools or so, and the thing that was important to me was, which is somewhat less concrete, which is what schools will actually value me as a student and as a researcher. So, like for example, you tend to hear a lot of people who go through grad school and they're just miserable. Like their advisor doesn't treat them well, their school doesn't pay them enough. So it's like for me, it's like okay, I want to go to a place where, one of the things I looked at, for example, was I looked at the health insurance of the school, and it's like, oh, this health insurance has specific stuff for uh, uh, trans people, and has specific stuff for people in domestic partnerships rather than marriages. So like people fought for that. So odds are it's probably a decent framework to support it. So like that's how I looked for places, and that was what I considered important to me.
Great. Anyone else? How about Tiffany?
Sure. For law school, I applied to 10, and I think that's something that everyone pretty much does because it's a bit of a numbers game. But for my PhD program, I applied to 4. I wish I would have applied for graduate school based on some of the factors that Raziq just said, because that's pretty genius and I think really good advice. I predominantly was looking to um, like capitalize on resources because I'm in history and philosophy of science, and we don't get as much funding as traditional STEM programs get. So Cambridge, Massachusetts made sense. So I'm close to my research site. And I was also primarily focusing on working with specific advisors. Yeah, so just 4.
Okay, great. So I see that we have lots of questions coming in. So I will read out the first one. When did you know what you wanted to focus on? Did you stumble into it? Did you always know you wanted to focus on it? Or was there an unexpected path that took you there? And I think the next question is related, so I'll just read that as well. How did you decide that you wanted to go to grad school and not industry or something else? So maybe we can talk about why we chose grad school and why we chose the research and the path that we are taking. Uh, should we start with Taylor?
Sure. So I, in undergrad, worked to support myself. So I paid my way through undergrad. And so by the end of it, I got really burnt out. And I wanted to leave and I didn't want to do anything else at school. I was so tired of it. But my mom sat me down and we had this really great conversation about, like you're in physics, like think of what you can do if you continue your education, like all the cool things, like because I love it. Going to an observatory it's like it's my happy place. That's my church, is going to an observatory and just sitting there and staring at the cosmos. And so I realized that going to grad school would enable me to continue doing exactly what I loved, and getting this higher degree would like let me do these sorts of things. And so that's kind of what led me to decide to apply to grad school, regardless of the fatigue that I had. And it's been great. But as far as choosing a particular science, originally in my undergrad, I worked with supermassive black holes in the centers of massive galaxies, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. And then I met my advisor at Texas A&M, Casey Papovich, and it's for me it was really important about my advisor relationship. If my advisor is excited about a kind of science and I can feel that connection to the science, I can get excited about it. And so I'm now in love with my science, but I think originally I wouldn't have thought to choose this science. It's the relationship I had with my advisor that kind of really helped that along. So
Awesome. Xuan?
Yeah, sure. So I think the way how I got into grad school was like, so when I was in high school, I watched a lot of like sci-fi anime or movie, and that made me feel like, oh, physics is so cool. And also after I built out my interest in physics, I saw a documentary about CERN. I felt like, well, I want to work there. So fortunately, in my undergrad, like my advisor was actually working one of the experiments at CERN, and so I started getting the research and I really loved them. And so then I doing my work, I met my current advisor and she said, oh, would you like to join our group? I say, sure, of course. So, and also it's the nature that if I want to work in particle physics, it just seems like it hard to get any related job without a PhD. So with all the factors add up, I think going grad school was my only choice, and I'm super happy with the choice I made.
Awesome. Thank you, Xuan. So I will also add that especially for the person who asked about industry versus graduate school, of course, graduate programs can be a great experience, but there are industry options for people with bachelor's degrees in physics as well. And we can chat more offline. You can come to the careers booth and ask us about that. We have a lot of resources for you in your career exploration. Okay, so next question, and there are two more that are related, so I'll go ahead and read both. How did you find your research groups? And how did you go about approaching professors to learn about their research and establish a connection? Who wants to start?
Yes, so I'm really glad this question was asked because when trying to find an advisor, my main goal was that it had whoever you're working with, it has to be someone that you communicate well with. And for me specifically, that means I like to meet with them regularly. I like to be able to be frank with them about today's just an anxiety heavy day. I can't really do it. I can't really do anything. I like to be able to do that. So when I met with my research group, I talked to them. It's like, okay, what works best for you? Is this a right fit? And I figured out, can we work together well first and then do our research interest lineup second? That's not always the choice for people because maybe your department is small, maybe there's only one person doing what you want to do or something like that. But I was lucky enough to where I had a couple of options, and how we developed the mentor-mentee relationship was how I broached the subject.
Anyone want to add to that? Okay, so the next, I'm going to skip one, and because this is related, so we'll go to how much research experience did you have before applying, and how did you find those opportunities and connections?
So I actually did a field switch. I only had electrical engineering training, and then I was practicing law for a long time. So I basically had no direct experience, but a lot of the industry experience I had was transferable because it turns out litigation looks a lot like philosophical and historical research that I'm doing. But with that said, I do study LIGO, so I had to take more physics classes, which I wasn't expecting on doing. So that included taking intro relativity class and taking general relativity, being very involved in the colloquia series going around on campus to come up to speed with exactly how things are going so I could pose the proper questions and be well integrated. But I thought that was cool because it was pretty self-paced and I got to gravitate towards what was interesting to me and what I needed to do for my research.
Awesome. Can we have one more person answer this? Go ahead.
Yes, so I did fair amount of research in my undergrad. So I basically spent all my summers of firm lab while I was in as an undergrad, which I personally think is super helpful because it gave me an idea about how this field actually looks like before it just kind of like a trail before I actually decide, okay, I'm gonna commit my 5 years of life to do this. So I think it's kind of like important to at least trying to take a summer or a semester to do some research to understand what is this field actually looks like. Because in my mind, when I was undergrad, I thought everyone just writing word on chalkboard, but then turns out everyone just sitting in front of the computer for most of the time. But turns out it's so cool. I really enjoy it, but it's just also different aspect than you can learn while doing research. So I think it definitely worth to trying to do some research while undergrad.
And I think Taylor wants to add to that.
Yeah, so because I was at a smaller arts university, there weren't as many research opportunities. Thankfully, NSF helped fund a certain summer research that happened. So that was great. But I also, during the school year, was able to do research, and simply because my advisor, which is one of the two physics faculty at my tiny university, happened to do astrophysics. And so I could do independent studies with him and then do research over the school year. And so that also really helped because as someone who's supporting themselves, I had to work to pay my bills and things like that. And so having the whole summer be devoted, if I couldn't be paid for research, was not possible. So the fact that I was able to do research during the school year too was super helpful. And so that was one way I was able to do it that wasn't necessarily through an official avenue, but it was still research and it still definitely helped get into grad school.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll add that having talked to different graduate programs, while GPA in classes are very important, having research experience is definitely important. So if you can even get one summer or one semester or half a semester, definitely do that. Graduate schools programs really value that in an application. Okay, so next question. For people who will be starting grad school this fall, hopefully, what do you think are most important things to keep in mind for a successful first semester? Who wants to take that?
So first of all, don't overwork yourself. I think that's one of the most important ones. I worked, this is bad, I worked 80 hours a week my first year because I was panicking. Don't do that. Try and get to know the grad students around you, especially the ones in your research group. Develop those connections and just kind of get a foundation there. Immediately start trying to build up rapport with your mentor, with your advisor, in the sense that, like Raziq was saying, like just keep that communication really good, and then consider finding mentors that aren't your advisor. So if you need help, you can talk to someone that isn't necessarily in charge of your life. But yeah, just try to not overwork yourself, I guess is my biggest advice.
Anyone want to add?
Yeah, I think that's is well, I think that's of the primary thing of trying to overwork yourself. I am currently in my first year, so if I figure out something, good, I'll let you know. But the biggest thing that I felt was there were a lot of changes that I didn't expect. Like, for example, when teaching a class, because I am teaching a class my first year with my graduate program. Uh, it's like I've tutored before, I've kind of helped out, but it's another situation entirely to be the authority figure in the room, and like that was a change that I wasn't expecting. So it caused me to change my dichotomy a little bit. Um, and being a researcher, doing stuff in addition to classes and whatever, it's like okay, uh, changing my perspective. I'm like, okay, like I'm have other responsibilities now. So in undergrad, classes were the number one thing, and now it's like, okay, maybe I can, as long as I'm taking care of myself and doing my other responsibilities, I don't need to uh, work myself to death over my classes. So it's just changing that I think I wish I kind of did a bit earlier on.
Awesome. I think Tiffany had something to add. There's another related question that asks, what was one thing you wish you knew before beginning graduate school? So if you want to add to that.
I can't emphasize the comments that were both made in terms of work balance. That's really important. But also adding to getting to know your peers and outside support groups, like that also includes grad students at other schools. So I think trying to go to a conference your first year is also super helpful because you need to build a large community, and it's great to have different areas of support available and people to collaborate with.
Yeah, absolutely. And if as a first year or, even as a fourth or fifth year, if you're having trouble finding funding for conferences, explore all the avenues. If your advisor doesn't have funding for you, see if your graduate program does. APS offers various travel grants as an undergraduate to attend as many conferences as you can, would definitely be my advice. Okay, so next we have two related questions. When in grad school do you get to try out different research groups, or do you mostly stick with the group you started with? And how did you decide between experiment versus theory? Did you try both as an undergraduate? Who wants to take that?
So I personally stayed with the research group I choose when I entered simply because they're awesome people. I had a very great time. I picked out experimental physics over the theoretical just simply because I like something more hand-on. Say, when I code doesn't work, I can go to the lab and fix a bunch of equipment. It's just kind of like a different taste. It's a good balance, but it is also common for students to changing around between the why they're doing the first or second year. So normally, I know a couple of students in my school they start as like a kindness matter group and then they realize they are more interested in the high energy so they switch and vice versa. So it's like you don't have to feel like when you enter school you say, oh, can I be your student, if you guys don't either the topic wasn't the thing you're interested in or any other reason. Like it is totally okay thing to do to switching around group to trying out, but I would highly recommend you to do that as early as possible, especially since then you will have more time to actually focus on the research you want to do.
Anyone else want to add? Did anyone else switch groups during grad school? No. Okay, I'll add my story then. I recently graduated last year from University of Michigan. I switched groups at the end of my second year. I left my previous group to join a new one, and it was very hard. It was hard, but mostly the struggle was internal because I felt like I was failing. So the advice I would give to myself and to all of you, to my past self and to all of you, is that it's okay. Like if something isn't working, it's okay to switch. It's better to switch early than try to drag it out in the group that's not working for you. So always put yourself first and try to find a new group that will try to learn the lesson from the first group and try to find a new group that will work for you. So I was in one lab that was very hard. The work-life balance was terrible. I felt like I was being judged all the time. And once I switched, I joined a lab that was much more supportive of my extracurricular activities, and I was much happier. So look for what you want. Talk to the graduate students in the group already to ask about the culture of each group before joining the group. And then there was also a question about experiment versus theory. I wanted to do experimental or theoretical physics when I was in undergrad. I didn't get a chance to experience it because it's pretty hard to experience, pretty hard to get theory experience as an undergraduate. Sometimes you can do it, but it's hard. But once I started graduate school, the theory didn't speak to me as much. So I decided to do experiments, and I don't regret it at all. I realized that the reason I wanted to do theory is because I was scared of experiments. And once I got over that fear, it was very empowering to use a bandsaw and a lathe and be able to build things and solder things. So I do recommend trying experiments, and you can try to pick up a theory project on the side if you like. Okay, sorry, I spoke so much. Next question. Did you obtain some scholarships to cover tuition fees and your expenses for your graduate studies? Who wants to? Taylor. Oh, sorry. Raziq, go ahead.
Yeah, mine's pretty short. My grad program has guaranteed funding for me for 5 years, so I didn't need to obtain too many outside funds for that. I did have some scholarships from undergrad that kind of I didn't use all of it, so it kind of went over to the next year. But besides that, grad programs do fund you, either through teaching or through paid research or through whatever. So finding the specific avenue might be a little tough, but there usually is a way built into the program.
Tiffany?
I would say also I only applied to grad schools that had full funding, but my research requires me to travel. And the funding is made up of covering your coursework years, having a research year, but also through teaching, and that is it's not a insignificant amount of time. So I think it is good if you get in a program like that to immediately start applying for additional fellowship funds or grant funds, because you may not, those will cover and allow you to free up some of your time. That helps you stick to a more reasonable timeline if that's something you're really worried about.
Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, no, this is all great advice. Also, so I came in with the fellowship and then I applied for another fellowship. But so even with the funding you can get from universities, there are definitely fellowships and scholarships available. And a lot of them, the ones that aren't the big ones, people walk away when there's still money on the table. And so just kind of, APS has a great resource for this, I think, of just like listing the massive amount of different fellowships and scholarships you can apply for. And this also goes into travel funding because I also travel a lot. But taking advantage of that is great. And even if you don't get these things, the practice from writing those proposals and applications is really like invaluable. So I highly recommend checking out getting scholarships and things like that.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, a couple people said this, look into the graduate programs that guarantee funding, because while it's great to have external scholarships, you can't depend on that. So just from attending this panel, you've heard of at least 2 schools that guarantee funding for a few years. So go ahead and do your research before applying to schools and choosing a program. Okay, so the next question is, what was the most useful class you took in undergrad? While our panelists are thinking, I want to repeat a piece of advice I received from my TA in undergrad. And the advice was, I was trying to figure out which math classes would help me most in physics graduate school. And the advice was, don't worry about which class it is. If you are taking math classes, what's important is that you're building skill sets needed so that you can learn new concepts more easily. Once you're used to learning certain concepts, then you will be able to learn the new concepts more easily. So really, it's about getting that training, not necessarily a specific topic. Any panelists want to add? Okay, no one. Okay, go ahead.
I really want to emphasize that word because I was like, what was my favorite class? And I think it was semiconductor physics class. But in that class, we actually learned how to solve very complex problems that had like multiple parts. And it was a class that allowed me to see how concepts come together and also trained me to like figure out problems on my own. And it came in my 3rd year. And I wish there was a way that I could have pushed it to like my 2nd year of undergrad. Also, my undergrad, which was University of Virginia, has a writing class for engineers. And this class is so valuable because we have to all be able to communicate outside of our field and within our field. And that class taught really effective communication skills, whether it's grant writing or writing your own research paper so that people outside your field can understand it. So I highly recommend if your school offers like scientific writing or some sort of technology, communication, and culture class, or history of science would allow this as well. That would be helpful.
Go ahead.
For me, the most useful class was not even in my undergrad institution, it was in my community college, and that was statistics. A lot of the statistics that we use, we kind of just learn while we're doing research. And it's really nice to be able to go to a mathematician and the mathematician tell you, okay, here is here is some fundamental basics of statistics that's very helpful. Because it was a community college and community college tend to be a lot smaller and stuff like that, professor ended up being like one of my dear friends. So like yeah, to me, that was by far the most useful class I've taken.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so moving on, we have a few more questions coming in, so I'm going to try to speed it up. Did any of you take a gap year, and how did that affect your studies in graduate school?
I effectively took a gap year. I graduated in, I went over one quarter, so I graduated in December, so I went back to school in September, so it was like 9 months or something. It was so good, y'all. Like, that break was just so nice. I used that time, like, I got a tutoring job, I took a couple of classes at my community college, I went back, I got to hang out with friends, like, it was that extra time, like, I think like helped me so much to kind of reset. And if people have the ability to do that, because like I know sometimes a lot of people can't, either they're not good in their house where they're in, or they don't have a stable network or something, and like you got to do what you got to do. But I was lucky enough to be able to have that, so I jumped at the chance.
Tiffany, did you have something?
Yeah, I took a gap year before law school because I was planning on doing like PhD in electrical engineering or applied physics, and I was actually terrified to do it. So I ended up working at a think tank, which allowed me to do mathematical modeling, but in a more or outside the lab approach to see if I actually like that. And then I see my whole legal career as a gap year to getting into like philosophy of physics. So I totally advocate this. There is no race to the finish when you're thinking about grad school, because I think it is a very serious decision. And if you want to try other things, just go for it. You're not losing time. I have no regrets.
Great. Okay, so next, what kind of support system have you had? I'm a mom and a wife in undergrad, so I'm curious what kind of outside responsibilities are you juggling? Go ahead, Taylor.
So I lean really heavily on my friends who are also my colleagues. With having the support system I mentioned before, having a support system of people who understand what you're going through. It's one thing. My family is also incredibly supportive, but it's hard sometimes to explain what it's like to be in grad school when someone who's never experienced it. Um, and so having someone who's going through it in some way, even if it's friends from other schools or from other programs, which I also have, um, it's that's been super helpful for me, just having someone to talk to who actually understands. But also one of my closest friends in my program, she's a single mom, and so for her, having a support system of friends who can also help her has been, I think, super helpful for her. And she also has family she can lean on as well. But that's probably my biggest one.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
This is very quick. Just one thing, like, don't knock out like a therapist. My therapist is part of my support network. Um, uh, People that help you out in a day-to-day life, because it's a profession, just keep that in mind, that like when you go, like you'll, depending on the grad program you're in, which is another reason why I chose mine, I have really good health insurance, so it's like, yeah, I'm gonna I'm gonna choose them, I'm gonna go to them.
Yeah, I would definitely add, look into all the resources that are available to you. Most graduate programs have at least a graduate chair or a graduate coordinator who are there to support you. Do your best to bond with your fellow classmates, because they will be your rock. They will really help you. And yeah, of course, look into on-campus counseling services. There are often free counseling services on campus, so definitely look into that. Okay, let's go with the next one. How did you go about writing research proposals for fellowships? Were they based off of your undergraduate research? Taylor, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So for the Nsf Fellowship, you have the option for the Nsf GRFP Fellowship. You have the option to apply as a senior in undergrad, a first year or second year in grad school. And because I didn't apply in undergrad, which is totally an option, and if you do that, obviously you would use your undergrad research. I recommend waiting till your second year of grad school, if you can, with funding wise, because for me, that was the best time because I got to build rapport with the people in my university and to use them as letters of recommendation. And then also got to get some kind of foundation with my advisor to know what my future would be with my projects. And I also thought it was really useful because applying for the fellowship forced me to sit down with my advisor and actually think about my path for my PhD, which I think I might not have had that conversation as soon as I did, if not for this fellowship. But like as far as applying for it, kind of related to what Tiffany pointed out, in the same vein as scientific writing, I think that persuasive writing is incredibly important. So like I said before, applying for grants and fellowships and scholarships really increase your skill in this vein. So if there's any kind of workshop you can take or something like that that kind of walks you through the type of persuasive writing you can do, I think that's super helpful. And then also for applying for fellowships, I reached out to people who had both successfully gotten it and not successfully gotten it before, and asked if I could see their examples. And so if anyone, by the way, is interested in the Nsf Fellowship, I would love to share what I did for it. And if it's not too many people, I'll also read yours if you need it. But just kind of getting people to read your work and provide comments and then seeing examples that worked and examples that didn't, that I think that is what really made mine successful. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Thank you, Taylor. Yeah, go ahead, Tiffany.
So I applied for the NSF grant that's later, that you apply to if you didn't apply to a research fellowship grant, which is a doctoral dissertation improvement grant. So that one obviously you would do after you have your research project and you probably have 1 or 2 years left to graduation date. So clearly you would have already established relationships and whatnot, but that one's a little special in that you have to form a relationship with the people that where you're doing your research, and they have to also show a form of support, and that they have to say that they will support your work being done at this location. So think about networking even if you do get an NSF graduate or a research fellow, because you might want to apply for the one later. And then the best advice about writing grants, and we review a lot of grants at FGSA for the travel grant, try and hook the reader within the first or second sentence and say exactly why your research is important and relevant, because you want them to keep on reading with detail. Because I think those applications are generally the ones that get flags for funding and make really that first cut.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. Okay, so next question. Is it beneficial to contact faculty members at universities of interest to get a better chance at graduate school admissions? So I'll modify that. Did any of you do that, and do you think it helped?
I did that and I have no idea.
Xuan?
So I did talk to my advisor before I applied to school, and I don't know if that affect anything, though my decision got faster than what I expected. So
Thank you. Yeah, I'll also add, I was given the advice, and appropriately so. It's great to reach out to specific people because it shows you're interested. Don't expect responses right away because a lot of faculty members are very busy and get tons of emails every day. But I will add, try not to limit yourself in your personal statement or statement of interest. So don't say I only want to work with this one person at this school. Try to come up with, if you are going to mention names, give multiple names, because if you happen to choose the one person that does not have any funding for new students, that might hurt your chances. So make sure to keep your application broad. Okay, this is a really fun question. What was the hardest part of grad school, and how did you get past it? Yes, Xuan.
I feel the hardest part for me is self-confidence and peer pressure. Is in a way then like when I enter grad school, I feel like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm so confident about everything. And then with the classwork and teaching work, and you just feel like, oh, everyone else has accomplished so much. like, what am I doing? So kind of like in a panic stage. And the way how to overcome is actually sit down and like thinking, okay, this is not gonna work unless I sort things out, and to figure out what you want to do and thinking about the step by step. Don't think about like big win, just like small tiny step to reach there. So you will be more like calm down and you will be able to actually start doing this thing. But just don't try to so hard to compare yourself with like all your peers, because you just feel like, I mean, I got to panic a lot when I realized, oh, I didn't do XYZ amount of work when other people has already done. So I feel like that's the hardest thing for me.
Anyone else? Yeah, Taylor.
So kind of on that vein, for me, probably by far the hardest thing is a thing called imposter syndrome, which is kind of was already described. But for those of you who aren't familiar with what that is, it's imposter syndrome, imposter phenomenon. It's essentially the feeling that you have gotten to where you are by luck or by chance, and that one day someone's going to find out that you're not actually accomplished, you're not capable, and they're going to find out you're an imposter and kick you out. And so for me, I struggle with it daily, but I'm getting much better with it now. And so one of the ways I get through it is I have this document, and it's like a README file on my home directory, and it's literally just I put any positive comment I get on me as a scientist, like on my work or on like me giving presentations, anything. I put my positive comments in there. So anytime I'm overwhelmed by this feeling, I sit down and I read through that and remind myself that I know I do deserve to be here. I am a scientist. I am doing great work, and so that's probably the best way to get through that. Just remember, like when you get into these programs, they chose you, they want you there, but you're not going to get kicked out unless something really awful happens. But there's tons of catches along the way that would prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I would definitely add to that. Imposter syndrome is everywhere in grad school. And honestly, the solution to it is realizing that everyone else is also experiencing it. So just build your community and talk openly with people. You know, there are a lot of people that sometimes say, because they feel pressured, that yeah, I'm working 80 hours a week every week. Be honest, be forgiving, be kind to others and yourself. You know, it's okay to not work 80 hours every week. It's like I made it through grad school without having to do that. So, you know, maybe some weeks I was working way more than other weeks, but just be open and kind and know that everyone is stressed out. Okay, next question. When picking a grad school, how much does prestige and ranking of a school matter versus prioritizing location, an advisor you like, or other factors beyond prestige and ranking? Anyone want to take that? Yeah, Xuan, go ahead.
So I definitely just go with advisor one. But it's just my personal preference. So I've been hanging out with some grad student when I was undergrad, and everyone's advice told me that be extremely careful with the advisor you choose, because then can make your grad school's life either be wonderful or miserable. So then, luckily enough, I find a good advisor, so I just go for it. But like, I mean, that's my just personal opinion. It just regardless which school you choose, be extremely like talk to all the grad students that you can reach out to in that school, but like just to make sure you pick the right advisor.
Yeah, I would add, so, you know, when applying, have a broad range. Go ahead and apply to those top schools if you want, but make sure you also have some middle range schools. Have a safety school if you can. And then also don't don't decide before you even apply. Wait for that recruitment weekend. It's so important. And like Chuan said, it's good to meet with the faculty and have some research group in mind. Talk to the grad students in that group. If you're interested in the faculty member, ask the grad students even before you've accepted to go there during recruitment weekend. Talk to the grad students and ask what their experience has been like, if they recommend working with that advisor or not. That is very important. Okay, so I'm gonna ask one more question. Can you live on your stipend? What kind of benefits are available besides the stipend? Healthcare, childcare, etc. And I'm going to not everyone. If you're not comfortable answering this, please don't. But if you are, please do.
Yeah, my stipend is fairly good. As you could see right behind me, I'm in a one-bedroom apartment that I can afford by myself. I have healthcare, I have dental, I have vision, I have. We just bargained for our union bargained for a couple other things that are going to be put in place soon, and uh, that, in a lot of ways, is uncommon. I recognize that, like, a great example is that in Santa Cruz right now in the UC system, there's a lot of strikes happening because the grad students literally cannot afford to live there, and the talk of personal stipend and whatever. Uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the ability to live in the place where you are, like it tends to vary a lot. Um, I tended to prioritize when it comes to that the strength of the union that I was going to. A grad school with a union immediately went near the top of my list because if they didn't have a union, that it goes back to the very first point I said, which is that I don't feel safe in that place if there's not a thing to defend me. So. I did fairly well where I'm at, and I feel pretty good. But I also recognize that that's not true for a lot of places, and that's something that we fundamentally need to work on as a community of physicists.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to end there, but there's a great question that just came in. How has COVID affected your work or research? Go ahead.
So I think mainly just like everything moved from the lab to home. So, but the good thing for a lot of us is like I mentioned before, everything is on computer. So technically, like if you're unless you're working on some hardware stuff, you can still procrastinating your work. So everyone's productivity kind of like dropped in a like different level, and also it just kind of like instead of talking to people in person, we have now a lot of Zoom meetings that never ends. So in a way, then it's still, but the good thing, like can still procrastinating during this difficult time. It just everyone's productivity get like dropped quite a bit.
Anyone want to add?
I just want to add something. Something that I've experienced through some of my students, which is, I mean, through myself as well, but it's primarily their stories. And that, like, this, like, your goal should not be, oh, I'm home, I get to do more things. It should be, okay, we're in a pandemic right now. Let's chill out. Uh, uh, my advisor and I have a very good relationship where it's like, okay, there's gonna be days or weeks where just like, there's just no motivation to continue on. So just do what you can, and that's fine. With my students, I make sure to point out that, like, yeah, like like so many things might be happening in your home life. Like you may get sick, your parents may get sick, and you may have to take care of someone, whether that be a wife or a child or a husband or a partner or whatever. Um, you may have a loss of a job in your family, and that might impact you. Like because you're stuck at home, there may be domestic violence issues, and like all of those things cannot be resolved with, oh well, your productivity just went down, but you could continue on. It's like, to me it's like, okay, we need to chill out a little bit. We need to make sure we understand the scope of what we're dealing with.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to add? Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
So I, yeah, I was mentioning Zoom fatigue is the thing. It's, or, just any of your video conference, it's the fatigue of having so many meetings has been draining on virtual meetings. But overall, yeah, so productivity is lower. It's also, at least in Texas, the schools are closed. And so, for instance, like my friend, everyone has to homeschool their kids. And so that's having that just be this added burden is exhausting from what I've heard. But so in our program, we have a graduate, our community is pretty strong with the graduate students. And so we try and have, monthly catch-ups where everyone checks in with each other. And then we keep an eye on people who aren't really good with isolation. So we check in with them. So while productivity's gone down, it's also partly gone down because we're mostly just trying to continue to support each other during this time because it's been kind of hard. Yeah, that's probably the biggest impact it's had on me.
Okay, let's see. I don't see any other questions. Can I ask any of the panelists to just give one highlight, one favorite thing about their graduate school experience before we close this out? Go ahead, Taylor.
To be honest, I love that I learned how to code. I didn't know much of anything beforehand. Like I learned Java in high school, but I started learning Python when I got to grad school, and it's just changed my life, and I love it. And it opens so many doors to know programming language in detail, and so that's probably my favorite thing.
My school has I have access to like 3D printers and laser cutters, and like I've just started kind of diving deep into like, wait, I could actually like 3D print like a pirate coin if I wanted to, like have like the uh going to a new place and seeing all the resources that there are. It's like, oh, I could actually do other things. Like learning that and actually doing stuff ended up being like the highlight for me.
So I feel like the highlight for my grad school is like when I was doing the outreach and when you're talking to people about what the research you have done, it looks wow on their face. You just feel like you're doing something super awesome.
Yeah, and I would say my research focuses on the social context that creates the field of physics and what physicists do. And it is very cool hearing all of the blunders, funny stories, challenges, and still their fundamental advances in the field of physics. That's at the end of the day, things progress, and they're great stories to tell about them.
Awesome. Thank you all. I just want to close out by thanking all our attendees. We had up to 133 people attending this call at some point. Thank you all our panelists for answering all the questions in so much detail. At the very end, I just want to remind everyone that there will be surveys after the meeting. So please let us know what you thought of this panel, if you thought it worked or not. Also, I've just created a thread in APS Engage. So if you all are, if you can go join APS Engage community, we can continue this conversation there if you like. All right, thank you so much and hope you enjoy the rest of the meeting. Bye.